Hello and welcome to MAP administration training. The first thing you need to do is get onto the website, which you can do by going to teach.map.nwa.org, but sometimes there's just always weird things in terms of like it wants to do a single sign-on. So generally you can just Google MAP NWEA and look in for one of these login sites here. Once you do that, I do recommend go ahead and bookmark it. So I've bookmarked this sso.mapnwa.org. And then the next thing you're going to do is log in. So every campus has a login name, and if you're having a difficulty with it, you can reach out to me, Nicholas Henning. But the login name should be your school's name, followed by the word Proctor, and then the password is Proctor, and the 5 digits of your school's zip code. That is where your school is, not where you're living, so just be careful about that. And then it'll take you to a page that looks kind of like this. There's a couple of pieces of information on the front page that you could find kind of, and there's resources and so on and so forth. You can like read about information that they have here, blah, blah, blah. Mostly you don't need to pay attention to any of this, honestly. You can go into contacts here. Really, it's just going to tell you to contact me or my boss, Kim Hatton. Please don't change the password. That's something that's useful, that everyone knows that this is the same systematic password for everyone. And mostly what we're going to talk about today is managed test sessions, but actually just as a quick deviation, I'm actually going to talk about reports first, just so you have an idea of what reports you might pull. If you are an AD, you might want to learn more, spend some time looking in growth reports here and seeing what is going on. But for now, I think that it makes sense to go to MAP growth reports and know about 2 primary reports that are really useful if you're a person who's just in charge of doing administration of the test. One of those reports is right here. This is the most useful one for doing administration, called the class report. The class report lets you pull a report for a given term, so probably the current term that you're working in. And what that does is it gives you a quick way to check which of your kids have finished tests in this recent term. So if you lost your tracker sheet, or just honestly you're a person who wants to double check your tracker sheet, or you're not very good at keeping a tracker sheet, the class report is going to be a great place where you can find a list of all the kids that are there. The other one that I really like is the student profile. This is where you can see kids' reports after they've tested. Do be aware that after they've tested, it does take overnight for reports to populate, so you're not going to see them immediately. But this also allows you to print something out. If you print out the kind of PDF that's the 2-pager for each of them for math and reading, it's 4 pages that you can give to parents with some numbers and some overall pretty looking graphs and things like that. The family report, by the way, is the 3rd one. This is another one that's useful to kind of hand to parents. It does a lot of sort of explaining of what's going on in MAP there. And then you can either go back to home, or you could click on the kind of, the 3 lines, the burger up there, to go to managed test sessions, which is really where you're going to be spending most of your time. A couple things to show you on here. So first of all, under saved testing sessions, you can see anybody who has done some tests here in the past. So it looks like, Berkeley Proctor has saved their test session from April 30th. They could open this again with the kids that they put into that testing session. You don't need to save sessions. It also doesn't really matter if you end up deleting these sessions. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we end the session later. This is more of a nice to know, but if you're like, I saved my session, where is it? You do have to click on this show bar here. That's where you can find it. By default, most of the time, I'm going to go ahead here and click on Test My Class, and that's going to bring you straight into a session that has every single kid that's enrolled at your school. I'll talk about why you might not want to do this in a minute, but this is all the students that are listed at Fusion Berkeley here as currently basically active in the system. And what does that mean, active in the system? It means that they are in Salesforce, they have an account, and they have the appropriate identifying information, which includes gender, date of birth, and grade. If that information is not in Salesforce, the student will not be in MAP. Again, also it takes overnight for that kind of change to happen. So if a student just enrolled today, they just put in that information into Salesforce, they won't be in MAP here. If you ever need like an emergency kid to be put in there, or there's a problem that doesn't really make any sense, you don't understand why they're in one system, they haven't popped up in MAP, go ahead and send me a message. Again, Nicholas Henning, you can send me an email, nhenning@fusionacademy.com, or it's probably even easier to contact me via Teams. Okay, so notice that there's 110 kids in here, and that's because the way the system works, every single student that is at Fusion Berkeley and active is going to be dumped into this class currently. And you might not want to deal with all of that, but it really doesn't negatively impact testing. So it's totally your call on how clean you want things. So I'm going to show you the other method of pulling kids into a session. And I'm going to go ahead and end this session. It's going to ask me if I want to save. I'm not interested in doing anything with this session in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it. And I'm going to go ahead and find students to test. And you can do searches, under certain things. But let's just say I know that I am testing the Barbanel brothers here, so I'm going to go ahead and add them. And let's say those are the only kids that I'm testing, or maybe I'm testing them and someone else whose name starts with, I guess apparently no one's last name starts with H. Maybe I have to type. Oh, you have to type a correct name. That's actually a really good point here. So sometimes what will happen is that kids will have funky names. Like for instance, let's say that Maya Siegel's name was Maya Siegel III. I've seen it where sometimes it's Miles Siegel III. And the way to find out if there are any weird last names is to look up the kid in Genius and see if they have any weird last names there. That would be the way to find kind of the appropriate students. And once you've found all the kids that you want to test that day, you can go ahead and click on Test Now. And don't worry, if you have more kids that show up where you're like, oh snap, I was supposed to add someone else, that's really easy to do. You can click on this Add Student button here and bring you basically back to the same page where you can then search for another student and click on Save and Return to Testing. Okay, so now you've got your kids here. They're ready to test. That basically, the kids could log in to go testing right now. I'm going to go ahead and show you, we're going to flip back and forth between what it looks like on our screen and what it looks like on the kids' screen. And I actually encourage you to go through this process on your own before running the test first. It's not very difficult. It'll take you a couple minutes and it'll just make you know what's going to come up. But this session name and this session password are really important as kids are going to go ahead and get logged in that way. So they're going to want to go to a website that's test.mapnwa.org/#no-pop-up. Why the no pop-up thing? If you, it's an automatically popped up website, and so anything with a pop-up blocker is going to go ahead and ding it and say, hey, I don't want to do this. I don't want to open this browser right here. And it will tell you right here, like pop-up blocker detected, and you can turn off the pop-up blocker and refresh the screen. So you can log in just to that test.mapnwa thing. But avoiding the pop-up blocker with the hashtag no pop-up is really convenient, especially if the kids are at home. You're going to get this problem. I actually changed the resolution of my computer just to make sure that I would get this problem a fair amount of the time, especially on the school student computers. I'll actually tell you that students' computers at home are generally better than this. But a couple main problems that you'll see. Number one problem that I see is this one, the screen resolution thing, which we're going to go through in a second. Two other problems that you might see. Browser, can't do Internet Edge. You should be going on Chrome. So again, on the school computers, a lot of times it defaults to opening to Edge if you put them a link somewhere. Or depending on the student and their computer, if they're doing their personal computer. So you can't be using Internet Edge. You should be using Chrome, or Safari works just fine. And then operating system, if the operating system is outdated, which I've only really ever seen on some of the Mac computers, then they really just can't test. They either need to update or use a different computer, or you can test by downloading an application on an iPad. So if they have an iPad at home, they can do that. But let's talk about this resolution issue. So currently we have a certain screen resolution and we need to fix it to something else. So the way to fix that is to go to the desktop, right click on the desktop and go to display settings whenever it decides to wake up. And when we're in display settings right here, what we're going to do is we're going to change to the appropriate numbers. Now, you don't need to memorize them because it says for you right there, 1024 by 768 is what we need. Of course, it says at least, like we seem to kind of have that, but it's kind of picky with the square size of things. And then you're going to want to scroll until you find the resolution. On the school computers, when you find this resolution, it is the second to the bottom. Looks like it's that way on my admin laptop here as well. So it's going to freak out for a moment and readjust the screen. Hopefully you can still see me. I'm going to go ahead and keep those changes. And now if I go back to my testing window, That's very nice. I know that it's blurry. Thank you. You can refresh the screen here and get the lovely and wonderful rocket ship login screen. So now, like I said, over here, you're going to want to take this session name. Maybe you can write it on the board and give that to the kids. Every single kid is going to use the session name, and they're going to use the same password there. And then they're going to go ahead and click on the blue arrow. And then what they can do is they can find their name from the list like this. Okay, so if I was Asher, I could find my name from the list and I could go ahead and pick the test. Now, you might not want kids to pick their own tests because maybe today is supposed to be the math day, or you're worried that they're going to pick the language usage test, which they're not supposed to do. We're really just supposed to do math and reading. You're not required to do the language usage test. So you can assign the test yourself. You can assign to one kid or multiple kids at the same time. So suppose that the Barbanel brothers here are taking the math test. We'll go ahead and click on them and assign their test there. And Maya can take the reading test today, right? You can assign them any way you want to. Notice, by the way, that they both say 6+ because they're for 6+ graders. They're supposed to be for 6 and higher grades. The language one right there is clearly different, and it's 2 to 12 grading schema right there. All right, so now all these students have their sort of tests assigned here. What happens is if Asher clicks refresh here, and I go to log in as Asher, you'll find that he is no longer able to select from the drop down here. And once he's gone ahead and selected his thing there, you're going to go ahead and click on the next one. They'll take a look here. Hey, there's a lot of times where the grade is wrong. That is not because MAP is wrong. That's because in Salesforce, your student's grade is probably incorrect already, and therefore it is putting wrong grades into MAP. If you tell me and I go and fix it in MAP, it will then automatically get written over by Salesforce again. So Salesforce has to get fixed first. And then once the kid has seen all this, they're going to confirm that it's them. It's going to say they're waiting for the proctor to confirm their information, which you're going to see here in a moment, or if you click on refresh page, is that to be confirmed will pop up. And I can do this in one of two ways. I can click on Asher specifically and go ahead and confirm him, or generally I use the lazy way, which is to click on this blue confirm button, which will go ahead and get the test started for him and for every other kid that was in confirmed status. So Ezra, Asher, and Maya had all logged in at the same time. I could confirm all three of them. And then if I go back to Asher's, you're going to notice that instead of waiting for the proctor, it says he's ready to start the test, and voila, he can go ahead and start taking the test here. Be aware that there's a couple tools along the top here, like a highlighter, things like that, that a student can use if they like those. If it's the math test, and you should tell them about this beforehand, if it's the math test, there is a calculator button that shows up on certain questions. By default, they're not really supposed to be using a calculator unless it's a specific accommodation that they have. And this calculator button, you just click on it and it shows up in the problem. So you can go ahead and use it for any problem where the calculator shows up. So you're going to read through the problem, go ahead and select an answer, and then the kid can down here in the corner continue to choose answers to questions as it's going on. Now, what you're going to see on your side of things is that the student is currently testing, and when I refresh here, you're going to see that Asher has finished question 2, right? He's up to question 3 on that test right there. And it's noticed that one of those was a rapid guess because I took basically no time at all in going through that problem. If the student is doing this test in such a way that they end up guessing multiple ones in a row, eventually the test is going to go ahead and lock them out. It's making it really difficult for me to go quickly now. Eventually the test is going to lock them out because they have guessed too many questions in a row and they're not really taking the test clearly seriously. So what will happen is they'll get this sloth screen right here, and there's 2 ways to unlock this for them. First of all, I would talk to them about the fact whether they need a break, warn them about the fact that we've been rushing too much, and then you can either give them the proctor pin to unlock it, or I just find it easier to go on my computer and then go ahead and click on the action. So generally, you're going to be using this action to resume things. By the way, I'm always clicking on these boxes on the left because that's just the way that I go through it. But I could, for instance, have gone through and picked any kid whose test is... Oh, it's being slow. Normally what this would say is paused, and it would like catch up. So it has not quite yet noticed that Asher is paused here. But if he was, you could go here and you could click on pause. There we go. Click on pause and it would select all of the students that are currently paused. Again, I usually just click on the boxes there, and then I would click on the resume action from the action list here. And what that's going to do is over on Asher's side, he's going to say it's not fixed yet, but a moment will go by and